From first being teased in a display case at SDCC in 2007, Masters Universe Classics has run for an impressive 10 years. Learn how one of the most enduring lines of toys started at the origins of the Masters of the Universe Classics panel. That's this panel, so if you thought it was something else, you were mistaken. So here are our panelists. We have the 4 Horsemen who have been the toy designers of Masters of the Universe since 1999. Raise your hands. And polite applause, thank you. Bill Benecke is the former design lead for Masters of the Universe Classics and the current design manager for Warner Brothers properties at Mattel. Scott Neitlich is the former marketing manager for Masters of the Universe Classics and the current director of in-house brands for Entertainment Earth. And David Voss is the former senior vice president of design for Mattel and the current chief creative officer for Loot Crate. Now, to start things off, I had a question which might be a little inside baseball for anybody else in the audience, so forgive me if it's a little boring. But I'm kind of curious how all of your roles at Mattel interface with one another. So we know one person's like a design leader, one person's a senior vice president of design, somebody's a marketing manager, somebody's a toy designer. So like, where did the directives come from? Like, how do those relationships work?
I don't know. Do we want to start down?
Do you want me to start?
This way?
Start here. And
Well, you were
work
the
our way.
highest ranking, so
Yeah.
I think.
So in many cases, like on the He-Man line, and going all the way back to trying to get the line back out to fans again, it's really just trying to find an opportunity at a very senior level, and that was my responsibility, is to look for opportunities to try to get that brand back out there again and set the stage, set the strategy, and give the team an opportunity to do what they do best. Then that's passed down to Scott or Bill to start to execute the actual product and the concepts and the business strategy.
Yeah, so I think on a team level, we would then take it, we would collaborate, figure out the business plan, the character choices. We'd work with these talented gentlemen over here to my side to bring the figures to life, and we would then shepherd it through production. Does that sound about?
Yeah, it was basically, before we pass off, self-explanatory kind of what you guys do. You sculpt the figures. Sorry, I know I'm supposed to be talking into this. But as Bill, we basically were involved in the process from both pre-figure to all the way to one, and then once we decided what figure it was going to be, we'd also be involved every day, as you said, shepherding it to shelf or to your mailbox in this case.
Yeah. It's a lengthy collaboration between us. So one step doesn't really ever entirely leave off, and one person isn't ever entirely off. We just keep managing different aspects of it as it goes from initial idea, macro idea, let's bring the business back, let's bring it to life, what can we do, what would people be excited for, down to the micro of, oh wow, this just came in my mailbox. This is amazing. Like, how did it get here?
And it's like a 62-week schedule between I have an idea for a toy line, Scott, Bill, I think you should make this, to it showing up in your mailbox. Almost 3 years.
And I think we got to give the guys a lot of credit. Keeping a line like He-Man alive at a company like Mattel, who's a mass market, retail manufacturer, is very difficult. And these guys were able to sort of run that business at a level that they could keep Mattel interested in order to continue to make that line. And obviously made great product that you guys wanted to buy. So a lot of kudos to these guys for the work they did over the years that they worked on it.
It definitely was not a traditional Mattel line in any way. It was
not at
basically,
all.
to point blank, it was a side project for all of us. Even though we were assigned to it, we all had other lines.
Mm-hmm. It was
a little less so on your side because you actually legitimately were assigned to it. But I think somewhat on my end, it was a little bit more of a cottage project I did on top of sort of managing the DC lines, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But which is what you need. Even like Brandon said, he's really motivating people now to, it's like it always takes somebody, to keep things, going.
You have to stay excited. And with Motu, we were always very excited.
You had to be.
And the idea that we got the keys to this amazing car that we could take around the block month after month
which was why we were willing to do it, because they gave us the car. Yeah. It's like, okay, you can drive it. So that's, that was basically the motivation to keep doing it.
Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was waiting to see if Cornboy was going to jump in. But
Well, I was just going to say, and then we were sitting there twiddling our thumbs, not doing anything, and they go, "Get this done! Hurry! We need it then!"
Yeah.
No, I mean, really, it was like they said. It was they came up with the lineups, what was going to be, and then they'd actually check with us. First of all, when we were doing 2000X stuff, we were just absolutely flabbergasted that Mattel would even allow us to play in their sandbox and to have anything to do with the designs of these. And then when we got to the point Masters of the Universe Classics, and they would come to us and say, okay, we got these lineups, they wouldn't say, do these. They'd say, here's the lineups. What do you guys think? We want your input. We want to know if you think that these characters should be in here. And we could go back and forth with them and have a little bit of input on what made it to the final lineup. And then we'd jump in, and like they said, we'd go back and forth with both marketing and with design department over there, and come up with a final product and ship it out to them. But one of the amazing things that we never expected when we first started working with Mattel is the amount of freedom they gave us to do what we were doing. I mean, a lot of times we would be handed off a project, and they wouldn't even question us. We would do the job, and then, okay, we're ready to send this to you. We'll send you some pictures. Okay, we'll send pictures. Okay, send it. We're like, oh, that was easy. I mean, there's a lot of times when they came back with changes. Every change that they made, obviously we're artists. We'd go, oh man, well, they want us to change that, and then we change it. We're like, oh yeah, they were right. We should have done that. So we made the changes and get it back to them. But I mean, it was a really collaborative effort, even though we were given a lot of freedom and leeway to do what we wanted to do artistically.
Yeah, it was always about trying to make the figures, make the products better and better. I don't know that we always got to where we wanted to be, to our hopes and dreams, but we always gave it a great shot. It was always collaborative. We were always excited to do it.
For the resources we had,
and to resources, we were very lucky because within a giant corporation, we were given the wherewithal. We were given the go-ahead to chase this crazy dream. Mm-hmm. And to show that it's not so crazy. It's just really good toys. So we were very lucky. We were very lucky.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that a little bit, in terms of obstacles, what was the biggest obstacle to getting Classics approved initially?
From the beginning, I think, as I said, we all know what Mattel is, and it's a big, giant company that sells to Targets and Walmarts of the world. I think convincing them that we wanted to go direct to consumers was new. I mean, if you dial back when we launched this line, nobody was really focused on delivering product straight to collectors before. And we knew that was the only way we were going to get it out there, because retail was not going to pick it up. So the biggest obstacle was the bet on what the volume was on the figures. So the original forecast, we built a business model, and I think it was about 7,000 or 8,000 units per figure. And thanks for the great work that the Four Horsemen did and all the passion you guys had. I think it went up to about 14,000 or 15,000 figures. So we clearly achieved the goal, but getting the management team, by the way, I guess I was the management team as well. I was the management team trying to, those guys, I always think of the creative is not quite in there. But yeah, getting them, we set a bar.
They're also the number crunchers.
I just wanted to make cool. So somebody's got to decide what we're going to do from a financial model perspective, and that was it. Making sure we could reach that number and then convincing everybody that we could do it. That was the big hurdle. And then once we got the right to do that, trying to figure out what direct to consumer even was back then, and finding the right partners to do that, and then hiring the right team to sort of manage that internally. We didn't really have, like I said, it was so early in that business and selling online directly to consumers. We didn't really have the people in-house to do that kind of thing. So it was not only building the product, but building the team to be able to get away with doing that. And then also always keeping it at a level where it was sort of off the radar. No one was really paying attention to what we were doing. Everyone was busy with Barbie and Hot Wheels, so we were doing this little pet project over here. And we all learned a lot of stuff along the way, and that was the benefit to doing it, and also the benefit of working on something that we really loved.
Yeah, and I think, too, it helped when we would put physical product in people's hands.
Yeah.
Like, I remember seeing the first Skeletor, Beastman, He-Man samples that came in and just being blown away. Like, you can't not love those figures when you have them in your hands. And that cuts some ice, too, of like, this is just great product. This is cool.
Yeah, the nature of the first prototype was kind of surreptitiously slipped into a display case at SDCC.
That's thanks to Dave, because what happened was we brought a prototype. 2000X had ended. We didn't want Masters to end. There were some other things that were going on to kind of keep the brand noticed and keep it in the eyes of the public. And so we brought, some of you heard this earlier today, we brought a prototype of the Masters of the Universe Classics version of He-Man, kind of the preliminary version, to Comic-Con with us that year. And we're having breakfast with Dave and some of the other guys from the Mattel team, and we were showing it to them, and we were all excited. And most of the group was, they weren't negative, but they were kind of lukewarm. They're like, oh, we love it, it's great, just not sure what we're going to do with it. It's fantastic. And
because
Dave,
there was no retail plan.
Right, and Dave was like, you know what? Let's put it in the case. Let's see what happens. Just like stepping outside the box, not saying, you know what, we have to run this past a marketing team, and we need to do a focus group, and we need to do some kid testing first. None of that. It was like, let's stick it in the case and see what happens. The fan response was phenomenal. Like, it was you guys, essentially, your voice, when you said, holy crap, what's that? We want that, that kind of started the ball rolling. Scott had already been working on a possible plan to bring back some form of Masters of the Universe Classics. We had been working on this prototype for just Masters of the Universe in general, whatever it might end up being. And we were working on this hopefully new iteration of what the original line was kind of envisioned to be, just more updated. And Dave took a chance and said, let's put it in the case and see what happens. And look where we went with it. It was an amazing step. Unexpected.
It was an amazing sculpt. We were at breakfast. I was like, oh my God, this thing's amazing. People should see this thing. So it wasn't that hard to make the decision to put it in the case.
I remember we were like, not like the fans are not going to like it.
Right.
It wasn't a risk.
Maybe, but I'd had a tendency to do that kind of thing before as well. We did that with G.I. Joe a few years earlier at Comic-Con. With a 3 3/4 inch line. When I worked for Hasbro, we just brought it to Comic-Con and showed it to everybody when we weren't supposed to. So I thought I might as well just continue to do the same thing over and over again. So it seemed to work. I wasn't getting fired yet. So.
And also, as CB mentioned, when they brought the prototype, we had already started work on, we were already pitching doing a collector line at Mattel, not with the sculpt, because I had no idea the sculpt existed. Our plan was to use, I think, 2000X pieces and kind of bash them together. We were even going to use, I think it was the Ice Armor He-Man was going to be King Grayskull because he had the big boots. And then when we saw your sculpt, we said, oh, let's do this. This would be better than just reusing the 2000X pieces to make new characters. So it was sort of both. It was the fact that they independently came up with this awesome-looking sculpt, and already at Mattel, we'd already been talking about doing something, and there were finances and people looking at stuff, so I was already like, okay, maybe we just don't know what, and then that sealed the deal.
Yeah, it was just, it was amazing how it just kind of was meant to be. It just all kind of came together, and that's happened to us a few times in our career. When we first went to meet with Mattel, things just kind of fell into place, and then when this thing kind of came together, it just kind of fell into place. There was a couple of different teams that kind of had the same ideas going into it, and it just blossomed from there.
And actually, the funny part about it was the original conversation we had that we were going to bring these prototype, or that prototype was like, yeah, I guess you can bring it if you want, because we don't want to confuse the consumers, because we were just ending with the 2000X stuff, and we had been working on the NECA stuff, the NECA statues. And they were like, well, we're not sure we want to confuse the consumers about where we're going with it. And then, obviously, you guys saw that direction, and it took off. Yeah. But, if we had said at that conversation, like, all right, well, maybe we shouldn't even bring it, who knows? We may not have gone that step.
And then we'd all have Ice Armor He-Man with King Grayskull's head. As a one-off Comic-Con item. Like, that was basically going to be the last 2000X figure. Essentially, we're going to kind of cap off 2000X with a couple figures, as opposed to starting over with it, which made
there was
so
a
much more
question
sense.
in the earlier panel that none of us really had the answer for, and maybe you guys know. What was it? 42, that is the answer. What was the reasoning behind doing King Grayskull as the first release for Masters of the Universe Classics?
Oh, I can answer that.
What was that?
Because because of the original plan. Because before we saw your sculpt, the plan was to reuse 2000X pieces.
Gotcha.
So, the two characters we talked about doing were King Grayskull, or even maybe doing Horde Prime, because no one knew what he looked like, and we could use all sorts of pieces in the Trapjaw's piece or Two-Fate, whatever. Too bad. So basically, you guys probably know from working with Mattel, once something's in the production line far enough along, it's really hard to change it, which is why you guys all got a Roton. So basically, King Grayskull was already in line to be the Comic-Con figure, and the switch we were able to do was, instead of using the 2000X parts, we were able to switch to use the new Classics parts.
Gotcha.
That's why he happened.
All right.
So there you go.
And we lengthened the legs just a little bit in the calf area, so King Grayskull's just slightly taller than He-Man.
So what I'm hearing is kind of that the overwhelming kind of fan feedback at that convention is kind of what convinced the internal stakeholders at Mattel to kind of give Classics a shot. So this kind of question kind of relates to that. What was the metric that they used to measure fan response that they decided this was the threshold of fan response that made this a viable thing that we should try? I guess I'm asking because, Mattel's got some stuff out in the hallway that they're kind of saying, like, hashtag tell Mattel if you want this stuff. So if we could get some inside information about how loud we have to speak to get the things that we want, that would be really nice.
It was just sales. Pure and simple. Once we hit the number, they were fine. When we didn't hit the number, they wanted to pull the plug.
Yeah. We got a good response. It was really at the time there was no hashtag. Hashtag what, right? At the time there was none.
Yeah, there was no Twitter.
We couldn't go to Instagram to try to track number of hits or see a YouTube video. It literally was that early. Once again, like He-Man and Master of the Universe was doing things before anyone else was, which is funny because Hasbro's just launched a direct-to-consumer thing, and they're selling stuff 12 years later, and it seems fresh and new. It was like a big announcement. This team's been doing it for a long time, and there was no way other than through the PR and just the reaction we got at the booth. It was really that raw that it was like, wow, people are reacting really positively about it. The guys on the team loved it. We had a lot of passion for it, and I think that's what really drove it. It was like, what do we got to do to make this happen? And when the senior management team saw the amount of passion we had and had a logical business plan that the team completely built, they said, let's take a risk and see if we can make this thing happen. And it's paid off. Yeah. It's been useful in many ways other than having the opportunity to sell product to you guys.
Yeah,
and once we hit the numbers, sorry.
Yeah, it was always, like I was saying, it was a very safe and protected environment we were provided with. Like, all of our upper management was on board with us making these figures and supported us to, okay, let's see, another year? Sure, another year. And
it's also why the
let's get
subscription
bigger and bigger.
model, I don't mean to interrupt you, Bill,
Yeah.
but it guaranteed, that's why we had to do this, because it guaranteed the sales.
Right.
And basically the upper management would leave us alone and give us all this awesome creativity as long as we got those sales. And that's why I was always begging for subscriptions. Because as long as we hit that golden number, we'd be fine. But if we didn't hit the golden number, everyone had started asking questions. And so that's why it's like, I just have to hit that number, because that's the shut up number kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, you look at Castle Grayskull. Like, you were crowdsourcing that long before.
Oh yeah,
that term existed.
That was way before anyone else.
But Hasbro created that.
Yeah,
Hasbro invented the idea of selling a large playset. Yes.
Yeah.
So this question is for Scott specifically. The line is really robust at this point, but are there any characters that were planned in the Notorious binder that we have not seen yet?
And I was going to bring, I still have the binder. It's actually at my office, and I meant to bring it with me. And I was in my car on the way back from Simi Valley, and I was like, oh, no, I left the binder on my desk. Essentially, the 2016 line that was planned out was a full year, and then Mattel cut it to what was a half year, basically. And for the most part, most of the figures that were in the second half of the year have now been released by Super 7, like Lodar, and some of them were, I believe, were even sculpted with the intent that Mattel would have been releasing them, and then when it didn't happen, Super 7.
There were a few that were done before that.
Which you guys could talk to more than I could, but as far as direct characters, and again, like they've now been released, like Stridor was supposed to be the back end to Night Stalker. Like, if you're going to invest in the tool for this giant robotic horse, the whole point was to do 2 and get your money's worth. I was shocked when they only released 1. I was like, wait, that's why it was a full year plan. Like Tuscador was the other half of Hans Hammerholder, was going to be the other big figure. So it would have been 2 horses and 2 chunky figures. But essentially the rest of the basic figures, I mean, Granita was there. I know Lodar was there. I know now the Lady Slither was there. That was one. But for the most part, Hawk, they've basically all been released by Super 7, essentially. And I never planned anything beyond 2016, and Mattel clearly didn't. So, basically Super 7. What you're getting now from Super 7 is that, more or less. I mean, we didn't do the Mummy. He wasn't there.
All right, excellent. So you mentioned briefly before that there were some changes that were requested of design, right? Were there any specific ones that call out to you that you have an anecdote off of hand of something that is different that we received than what was initially planned in terms of changes that you were asked to make to a particular figure?
That's tough to recall after a couple of hundred figures.
I mean, I would say that just generally what we showed Mattel was very close to what came out. I mean, when we did get a change, it was often possibly for an engineering issue or something like that, or can we add an accessory, or sometimes pull an accessory. That was something that happened quite a bit.
Pulled accessory was probably the most thing.
For Plundar, we did the robot egg rabbit guy, and that was a really cool big accessory, and that just got pulled right out because it was just too expensive.
Cool prototypes of that thing at the studio.
But it really, I mean, the changes were always minor.
Yeah.
It was because we were hitting our number, basically. Because we hit our subscription number, because you guys funded the line, that was why management was just like, run with it. And why we were able to, that was why.
And because the team was just all on the same page. I mean, if you look at the panel here, I mean, it's a young panel. It's all the ages of, we all grew up with this stuff. When we came in 2000X, a lot of the people that were in place there were old regime folks. So by the time we hit Classics, all the right people were in place. That we were all into it, and everybody wanted to see it happen. So we very much were on the same page about just about everything moving forward with this.
So maybe a broader question might be helpful. Was there a figure in particular that was more difficult to produce than others? Like one that was kind of like a design challenge and from an engineering perspective, or one that was just like a headache to create?
For us, I know Stondar and Rock On were a really tough one, especially because a lot of what would be a challenge for us is Sondar and Rock On the original line were 5 points of articulation. So you could take those figures, and they were also short, stumpy figures. So you could take those figures and just turn them over. Here, we were executing the same concept, but on figures that were proportionally completely different, as well as structurally different from an articulation standpoint. So we couldn't do it where it was just a complete transformation. We had to add that separate piece in the front. And so there were just actually more moving parts to the figure than the original. That one stands out to me as one of the tougher ones.
And Rotar and Twistoid were kind of tough too, because they were just two very oddball characters, and then we had to try to make them fit the Motu Classics format. It was a challenge. It was a fun challenge to do, but to create those guys where not only would they have the spinning top lower torsos, but then you can tear them apart and put them together as actual, five-limbed figure or four-limbed figures, and then have them look similar to the classic versions of them, but still fit in with the Masters of the Universe Classics. It was kind of a tough thing to do.
Yeah, I think somebody mentioned in a previous panel that, the design challenge with the Sorceress that Super 7 is implemented with the flexible fabric or the flexible plastic for the wings is kind of like a new kind of design and innovation that was used for that particular design challenge. Is that something that could be applied to, say, for example, a Starburst She-Ra? Now we have this flexible material. Would we be able to have a character that can raise her arms and have an exploding cape, for example? I thought I would.
Well, I mean, things are always advancing, and I think sometimes you always figure you have one shot at it, and you want to give the best shot that you can. And sometimes you get lucky, and you can go back and revisit the character again with hindsight of knowing, I was like 80% of where I wanted it to be. I think I could really do a better job the next time. So I think absolutely.
And Roboto was a nightmare because we had to run every
Nightmare's
gear.
A word for it. Yep.
Because in order to make the gears work, we couldn't paint them. They had to be run.
They had to be run. So they had to be run. The tool had to be run five
times. And that's why the shoulders wound up getting reversed.
When they say run, they mean the tool had to be used and the plastic had to be molded in different colors every time,
yes.
Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they couldn't run more than one in the tool.
Right.
And then in order to get the separate colors, and then there was actually some stuff on the line as far as separating the gears once they were ejected from the tool to make sure one Roboto didn't get all red gears or something like that, so we would match
it was a
vintage
nightmare.
colors.
We spent more time on that figure than any figure. We did. And then when it came back with the reverse shoulders, I was like, you got it, like, oh my God, we spent so much time on this figure, and for it to not come out perfect was like, what was the point of living? So.
File that one under my 80% comment.
Yeah.
Like, you'd like to revisit it.
And this might be a little bit of a departure, but we have somebody, a couple of people on the panel that have some work that kind of synergizes with Warner Brother properties a little bit. The Four Horsemen have worked on Thundercats action figures for Mattel, and then Bill, are you involved with the licensing with Mattel for Warner Brothers properties at all? Because I know you work with the DC comic book. And then now we also have the crossover with Injustice. We had the crossover with Thundercats. Is there anything you guys could tell us?
Movie stuff.
Yes. Is there anything you could tell us about Thundercats?
Well, the thing that we can tell you is that a couple of figures that hadn't been revealed before, but I think at least some people in general public knew that we had sculpted during our original run on Thundercats were shown this weekend. And there are people, obviously us, I'm sure all of us on the panel here that would love to be involved with it. But we definitely want to be involved with doing that again. And we know that Mattel, there's some people at Mattel that really want to be involved with that again. Whether that'll happen or not 100% sure. We can't really reveal anything about that yet. But there's plans, hopeful plans to revisit Thundercats Classics. So,
is there any... Hold for applause.
That was...
Is there anything that fans could do to tip the scales in their favor to maybe get some Thundercats?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can imagine is just be very, very vocal that, yes, you want this, and that, yes, you'll lay down your hard-earned dollar to buy these things. Because that's the only way that, if it does relaunch, that it could continue to sell.
Yeah, I think enthusiasm is, of course, wonderful. The more vocal the enthusiasm, the more numerous the enthusiasm, that's terrific. And understanding that I'm enthusiastic and I would also be interested in signing up to buy these figures is also a key component.
And that conversation with Warner Brothers has been going on for 10 years, really. I mean, when we started the line right away, I mean, it's a natural collaboration. We were like, Thundercats, let's do it. And
Yeah, we worked years to try to get, yeah.
I mean, we've been talking to them forever about that. So if there's emails that need to get sent, we have some Warner Brothers emails you could have and send it to them. It's not that we don't want the things. We've been begging them to do the collaboration for years. And as you guys know, that thing was in the vault for a long time, and they wouldn't do anything with it at all. And then Register did the animation. It didn't work out so well. And, we tried to sort of piggyback on that as well. Yeah, it's been a long-term conversation.
Yeah, I remember we were at New York Comic-Con in 2009.
Yeah.
And we were announcing a new license, and
everybody assumed
and
it would be
everyone thought
Thundercats.
it was Thundercats.
Should've been.
No, it's this other thing. It's really cool. But is it Thundercats?
What
Like,
was
when
the
is
one that we
Lion-O
had?
coming?
Was it Voltron?
It was Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters.
It was Ghostbusters. We were premiering
That was a good one, too.
It
That was
was.
cool. That was a great
And
one.
we were super proud to show it. It was
Yeah,
like,
but everyone was like, oh, but it's not Thundercats.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's Ghostbusters.
By the way,
when you're putting out Panthro.
The reason we got Ghostbusters was because of Maddie.
Yeah.
So when we went in to pitch Ghostbusters and we wanted to get the license, we could show them all the work we did on Maddie and the fact that we were so early in doing direct consumers and that we had a great fan base out there that would potentially buy Ghostbusters. They gave us access to that property. It was a big part. So Maddie's had a lot of advantages for Mattel.
And another thing you said, what can fans do to support Thundercats or He-Man or whatever it is from Mattel? I can tell you is don't be negative. Be positive, but I don't think people truly understand how much being negative online actually does hurt the brands. I mean, I've gotten the privilege to work with almost every cool IP out there, Marvel, Star Wars, DC, Thundercats, Voltron. There's no fan base I've ever seen that's as passionate as He-Man fan base. I mean, you guys put everyone else to shame. You really do. But at the same time, the He-Man fan base can be more negative than any fan base. And it really does resonate. I would be in meetings where, CEO or whoever was, the big highest ranking person in the room, not necessarily David, but the finance people, they'd be like, well, let me see what people are saying. They'd just Google, Motu feedback. And the first thing that would come up would be like a thing about how horrible everyone at Mattel is.
Especially Scott Neitlich.
And people would, they'd put this stuff on the big screen at these meetings. And, I'd be like, look, these are just fans. But they would take the stuff very seriously. And the negative comments did add up. And that was a big reason why it would lose resources. The easy way to explain it, and I'm sorry for blathering on, it'll be 2 seconds. Every line in Mattel, think of it like a big ship, like a battleship going out to the ocean. And the SS, there's the SS Barbie and the SS Hot Wheels and the SS Monster High, and they're loaded with non-media dollars and tooling expenses, and they get to do life-size Hot Wheels tracks at the Staples Center because they get all this money. And then Masters, Motu or Maddie was like a rickety canoe with a hole in it. And I'm paddling it down the river, and Bill's helping me drive it.
I've got the bucket.
Yeah, Bill's got the bucket, and so we're trying to just get to the harbor. We're watching the SS Hot Wheels, sailing out with its, spit shine. And here comes the fans taking boulders and throwing them off the cliffs at the canoe. I'm like, Bill, look out, here comes another negative comment. And the boulders that the fans are throwing are literally destroying the canoe. And I'm like, you guys don't realize how hard it is to do this, and you're not making it any easier. So if you want something from Mattel, be nice. Don't be negative, because it really does. It takes away resources. It's scarily, it does.
I pictured the jungle ride the whole time.
I mean, listen, to Scott, he put himself out there for us for a number of years, and that's not an easy thing to do because he did take a lot of shrapnel that came in through Mattel. So I credit him for that. Feedback is incredibly important. And the job that I have today, all the feedback he can give us is only going to make us better. We don't ignore it. Obviously, we're going to listen to it. It's just the negative feedback doesn't do us any good. But feedback is extremely important. And obviously, 80% of the time, we're going to try to get it right. Things go wrong. We're not intentionally trying to make something that's not great. We're designers, we want to make great product. I once told a head of Disney after a John Lasseter meeting who wanted all these deco hits and wanted all this stuff to make some of the Pixar Cars product great. They came up to me and they apologized. They said, Dave, we're so sorry John beat you up and he wanted all this stuff. I looked at him, are you kidding me? I'm like, that's all the stuff I wanted that the marketing department took out. They couldn't say no to John Lasseter, right? I'm like, why are you apologizing? It's 90% of the team, everybody wants to make great product, and sometimes it goes wrong. Things happen. So, feedback's important. Negative feedback doesn't really help that much.
So since we're talking about feedback, and you said you had email addresses of people at Warner Brothers we could contact, would it be possible for you to go to facebook.com/thepowercon and in the comments leave those email addresses for fans to leave positive feedback for Warner Brothers about their desire
I was
for
kidding, right?
Yeah.
I still do need to work at some point.
Yeah.
It's more we mean on social media.
Yeah.
It's not emailing the head of Warner
No,
Brothers.
it is literally more social media at this
Yeah.
point. Yes, I could do that, but I don't think it'd be a good career move for me to do that. Not yet. Give me another 10 years. And
It's
who
really
gives a
just
shit?
to get the noise out there about a groundswell of enthusiasm. You know, when you're looking at it from high above, you don't always realize how passionate people are for things and how much of an appetite there is for something until people start to talk out and post and use Instagram. And if it's just a matter of we love Thundercats and we want to see more classics, that sends a loud message when you hear 20, 40, 100, 200, 1,000, 2,000 voices all saying that. It says there's a market out there and we're not touching that, and that's a problem. So.
But if that market constantly complains to the Better Business Bureau that their figure is 5 days late and has wrong paint ops, then companies can be like, maybe this isn't worth our effort, and we'll just put more money into Hot Wheels that's going to make us money. I only say that because I love you guys and I love the toys, and I hated when, people complaining about things that were beyond our control and they're legitimate concerns, but it does take away resources and it kills enthusiasm. When the people like Bill and Brandon and hell are trying to say, let's do more Thundercats, and people are like, well, I don't know, I'm looking at this website, people are like, oh, I hate Mattel, it's tough.
Yeah, it's difficult based on the snapshot that gets taken, but
the overall picture is always wonderful.
yeah.
So I'm going to ask one more question of Bill, and then I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience, and you can feel free to start lining up in the center behind the microphone, and then we'll take those momentarily. So the Injustice crossover with Masters Universe is great. We're kind of 2 issues in. Would you be able to tell us anything about the possibility of maybe some Masters of the Universe characters making an appearance in, say, Injustice 3 by NetherRealm Studios?
Oh, as far as publishing plans, I can't speak to that.
No, I think he means the video game.
No. Be it video game publishing, comic book publishing, I can't. Long term, I can't speak. I know in the design area, Brandon is keeping his eye on this very closely. We're talking all the time about it. So it's not passing over anyone's head. But as far as those plans for where they're taking the Injustice franchise and how Motu works with it, I honestly don't know.
Well, I am putting in a personal request because I have not been to arcades really that much in years, and that Injustice game at the arcade that spits out the cool little cards, then you can tap those cards on the machine and pick the characters you want to play, that is the most awesome game ever. I love it, and it would be awesome to see Masters of the Universe characters in there.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right, we'll take questions. Is it on?
Yeah, just holler. We're right here. There you go.
Okay, so my question to you is that now since Toys R Us is out of business, right? Will we be seeing any of your guys' toys in Walmart or Targets, like the 3.5 inch figures?
Which
Which
toys?
Which 3 and?
Oh, the He-Man toys. Are we going to be able to get them at a Walmart now?
I think anything's possible. It's dependent on how they're going to use their retail space, and I'm sure that those items are being presented to them as something that would they be interested in taking.
Hi. Can you talk about that era before Super 7 and what led up to the end of the classics at Mattel and that transition? What did that look like? What were some of the stories that led to the end there so the licensing could go to Super 7?
I wasn't there.
Yeah, it's funny. That actually would have been a great question for the panel this morning.
Oh, okay.
I know going into that period, there was a lot of questions about, Scott has mentioned resources several times, how people's time was going to be allocated. A couple of the businesses were really growing like gangbusters, and we needed more people. And there was a thought that perhaps partnering with another company could keep the business going in a way that the big corporate Mattel wouldn't have quite all the hands to take care of it. I know that you were working to keep the line going in the last couple of years, working closely with Brandon, and sort of fighting the good fight there.
I mean, I from my perspective, just from being there, and then a line like this needs basically a day-to-day champion. I think I used that line once online, and people were like, "What do you mean he's calling himself the He-Man champion?" But it does, and when cheerleader, yeah,
champion might
be
be more
aggressive,
appropriate.
be aggressive, and
you're fending off the boulders from the canoe.
essentially. And I mean, yes, you know what? When I left, there was no one willing to fill the gap. I'll tell you exactly. I mean, nobody wanted to step up.
I left.
Yeah, and David left.
My
Wadley
partner
left.
on the SVP side of marketing, he left as well. So a lot of us at the senior level that sort of fought those fights in the executive meetings were all gone.
David kept the rocks off of me, basically, and with him not there.
Maybe that didn't help, new teams come in. And listen, I did it when I came in. I made some changes, and I can imagine new teams came in, new management comes in, and they make changes, and they thought good decision would be to sort of do the Super 7 deal. Those guys are great. They do amazing products. So
I mean, it was probably absolutely the best move because Mattel is not set up to do a line like Classics. As I mentioned slightly earlier, while Bill was assigned to work on it, I was only assigned to work on Maddie for 6 months of the 9 years I was at Mattel. All the rest of the time, I did it as a side project because I loved He-Man toys and I wanted to make these. So I was doing that on top of being the brand manager for Green Lantern or DC or whatever else was my day job, or Hot Wheels Star Wars. So when I left, there was no one willing to basically be the manager on top of their job. Because I didn't realize actually until I left that I was doing 2 jobs. I thought everyone and then as soon as I left, I was like, oh my God, I was doing the job of 2 people. What was I thinking? So yes, I mean, it was very much, I left a void, and there was, rightly so, and especially a lot of times because of the negative comments. Nobody wanted to do that. I could understand why nobody would want to be the brand manager for Maddie, honestly. So I think giving it to Super 7 was a genius idea because Mattel is not set up to do people's passion projects. When they're supported by management, you can get away with it. Mm-hmm. But when management's not there to support it and the person doing the passion project then also leaves, there was no one left. Literally, in fact, they even had a guy in Canada who was running Mega Bloks, running it for a few months, and then he was let go of the company, and they didn't even, the management in El Segundo didn't even know that, and they didn't even know he wasn't even running it anymore. So it's that's how
that was a strange time for us.
Yeah,
he came in super positive at Toy Fair. We were showing off all this great stuff, new Thundercats, and he made this big announcement, oh, Masters and Thundercats, and it was great, and we were all excited. And then a couple of months later, we were like, oh, they were telling us, yeah, he doesn't work here anymore. Oh, well, who's handling those brands? We're not sure. And we're like, what? What do we do now? It all kind of came back, but it was really confusing for a few months there.
There was a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Who takes the call?
We had some strange meetings.
Yeah.
Someone has to be there very passionate about something like this to make it happen. So it's giving it to Super 7 makes sense because they're a company of passionate people. And they don't have the overhead and all of the logistics. When we would say logistics, that became another nightmare online. But it was true. That's what it was. It was logistic problems. I don't know what else to call it.
Well, that was very insightful. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
So with Masters really kind of starting out at San Diego and San Diego being kind of like a big marketing machine and an integral part of it, is there anything that you plan to do for San Diego as an exclusive or you wanted to do that you never got to do?
I mean, I remember, and we kind of touched on a little bit with what Dave was saying, that, we would have breakfast at San Diego and you guys would frequently bring this cool Christmas in July box of, this is something we've been thinking about. I remember the minis, the 9-inch, kind of more square Enix He-Man, the super hyper detailed articulator, and we would get to open the box and try to and look at these things and wow, how can we work this into a line plan? Where does this have a home? And in some cases, like the minis, we found a home and figured out how to get a program going.
But nobody bought them.
But you never know. But trying to find a place in the map for them It was always very cool, and then you'd get that reaction. Oh, this is awesome, but that kind of hedgy.
But what do we do?
Like,
I love those minis so much.
Yeah.
They're some of my favorite.
But those breakfast surprises. So there are a couple of things from there that I know we saw that's like, oh, this would have been really neat. There were the sprue figures that we did on DC, actually, were not Motu, but I remember they evolved in a very different way. So there's some cases where what made it out to retail looked very different from where we started. It was a journey that led.
And I can tell you specifically for 2016, again, for that roadmap that got cut in half, if you will, the Comic-Con item that year was going to be a Prince Keldor, Prince Randor 2-pack from the Origin of Skeletor mini comic, like basically them in their armor. It was supposed to sort of be like an Obi-Wan, Anakin, Clone Wars, kind of thing, like them in their heyday. Because at the time, the movie version, like 7.0 with Sony, was going to very much center on the Keldor Randor relationship. So we thought, oh, it'd be great when we'll get that out that year. But then, of course, then I left Mattel and the previous answer.
Yeah.
So
I can't. I mean, beyond the obvious of Snake Mountain.
And that was the year there was no Motu San Diego. That was supposed to be the exclusive that year.
And the planned second wave of DC Motu 2-packs, because we were looking at, I remember Trap John, Deadshot, and Red Tornado and Cyclone.
Batman and Man-at-Arms. And art was done for some of those.
Yeah. I know Batman and Man-at-Arms was the illustration was finished.
Yeah,
for sure.
There was a Motu Classics movie version He-Man and Skeletor on the early planogram as a Comic-Con exclusive at 1.2, and then it kind of got all switched up, but who knows, maybe that'll happen someday.
There's surprisingly few things, though, that were left in the vault.
Like after 10 years, we got to do now. It's so much. I mean, there really wasn't, we did a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
This is the last question.
Yeah, I want to thank you all for making me so poor over the years.
You're very welcome.
My wife hates you. The one thing that always got to me when, we did discussions or things went online and all that was the famous quote, "in a movie year." And, are we going to get this? Are we going to get that? And sometimes it'd be like, well, in a movie year. And so that leads to the question, you guys kind of touched on it. How close were we to a movie? And what other media was looked at during this time with the classics line? Did you guys see other things? Did you guys work on other things or anything Motu related, like outside going to the media, like movies, for example, was always a discussion?
I can say that we've been working with Mattel since 1999. So we're almost at 20 years, and we've been in a movie year every year since.
No kidding.
I have a pile of
many iterations of scripts.
Literally.
We've actually seen a few, some good, some was
I think I met with you guys one year and showed you a sort of pre-movie, pre-viz book at Toy Fair or something like that, right?
Several times, conferences rooms at Mattel would be transformed into He-Man movie rooms.
The closest we got, very closest we got is, remember John Chu was associated with the movie? You guys all remember that,
Closer
John?
with Wadlow?
Way closer than Waldo. Because what we did was, we so wanted to get the movie made at Mattel, we decided we got to sort of take a lot of this in our own hands, and we went back in again just because we were passionate about it. Convinced the senior management team. We went over to Sony, said, hey, listen, we want to get this into pre-development. We'll pay for a studio location. We first offered a room at Mattel where we could actually have like a movie production space, and they said, no, you couldn't do it at Mattel. We needed sort of a neutral space. So we literally went out and we rented space in El Segundo, outside of Mattel, totally rogue, assigned a lease for a small building in El Segundo before anyone realized what had happened. And then we literally went out and bought furniture, built out this space, and we brought in a movie crew with John. And John and I and a whole lot of other folks from the team would literally go from Mattel over to the studio and work on the movie. And we had a whole room full of movie art, and we would actually bring some of the Sony executives down and would do reviews. And that movie looked like it was ready to go. I mean, we had the artwork is beautiful. I mean, some of the guys that worked on that film have worked on, let's see, a bunch of the Iron Man movies, Wolverine, just a ton of stuff. I mean, really just hot stuff. And then, unfortunately, John got an offer for another movie. Sony would not close the deal with John. So the way Hollywood works is if you're not going to do the contract, Sony wouldn't sign the contract with John, so John left the film. And then once that director leaves, another director comes in, you're starting from ground zero again. So every time you hear a new director comes in, you just sort of start the clock all over again. No one's going to pick up someone else's work, like, oh, I'll take over John's work. We got another director pretty quickly after that, but it was like, I took him over to the room, showed him the room, all the art. He's like, yeah, it's pretty good. It's like, let's start over. And that's exactly what happened. And he lasted another 6 months or a year. It's tough. It's really hard. We went through just boatloads of scripts. I mean, I spent most of my time reading scripts and stopped working on toys. We tried to make it happen. We just couldn't close the deal. It's hard working with big studios.
And that is time. So I'd like to thank all of our guests. Can we have some applause, please?